Good afternoon. Welcome to our last meeting of the season, which I hope we'll be seeing some of you or most of you in Cleveland. Who here is planning to go to the international conference in Cleveland? Okay. You may want to reconsider if you haven't signed up yet to go. It looks like a very interesting program. The program is posted on the website. Just a couple of brief announcements. First of all, the summer issue of Dorot, our quarterly newsletter, has gone to the printer, and you should be receiving it. For those of you who get it electronically, well, everybody gets it electronically. That should be going out via email in the next week or so. Those who have paid for the printed copy should be getting it probably within about 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not sure exactly what the turnaround is there, but it's a very interesting issue, and I hope you all who have joined JGS will enjoy it. If you haven't yet joined JGS, we encourage you to do so. You can join online, check out our website at www.jgsny.org and find the join page. What we normally do at our meetings is, if you're here for the very first time, whether you're a member or whether you're not a member, we don't care. We'd like you to stand and introduce yourself and just tell us the names of the families and or towns that you're interested in. No stories of research, just names and places, so that if there's anybody else in the room who has the same names and or towns, then you can potentially make a connection. Is there anybody here for the first time who would like to introduce themselves? Okay, I guess not. So welcome to all of you. Yes, if you, okay.
Pearl and Kibowitz.
Your name is?
My name is Robert Avner. The names of Pearl and Kibowitz. This is from Slutsk and Cub.
Okay. Are there, yes.
My name is Charles Lehat. My family comes from Poltava and Zawishast, if I'm pronouncing the second one right. The family names are Brownstein and Lehat.
And if there's anybody here who has introduced themselves but has recently had a breakthrough finding a new town or a new surname, please feel free to do so. Tell us about it. Okay.
Do you want to speak? I want to say I'm here for the first time, but I've been upstairs to the live research center, and it's very good. The towns are Kovno and Riga, Zukrov and Moot.
And what was the second one?
Moot or Mott, I'm not sure. I think it's pronounced Moot.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to turn the floor over to Joy Kestenbaum, our program vice president, who will tell you about upcoming events and introduce our speaker.
Okay, I have a few announcements. My first announcement is that you might have noticed that this meeting is co-sponsored by the Genealogy Institute, the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute of the Center for Jewish History. So it's a joint meeting, and Moria Amit, a joint meeting with us, the Jewish Genealogical Society, and Moria Amit, the genealogy coordinator and senior reference services librarian, who's upstairs, asked me to make a brief announcement about the Genealogy Institute. Normally it's open Monday through Thursday, 9:30 to 6, and Friday, 9:30 to 2. But whenever we have a JGS meeting on a Sunday here, the Genealogy Institute is open on the days that we have our meetings, so keep that in mind. She wanted me to mention that the Genealogy Institute, in addition to its resources upstairs and the databases, that they also offer their own variety of educational programs, including the handout that you saw, their monthly programs where you can see their summer topics and meetings on, if you got this handout. So, and they also do free workshops for groups from New York City area schools, senior centers, synagogues, and nonprofit organizations. So please pick up the information sheet and the flyer as well that announces this Genealogy Institute's summer program. And this is the sheet out front. Okay, so we have, if you go to our website, the meetings for September and October are posted. And our first meeting of the new season will be September 15th here at the center. And the speaker is Daniel Volkovitz, Emeritus Professor of Social and Cultural Analysis and Professor of History at New York University. And he will be speaking on searching for Patterson roots, remembered and forgotten in Jewish heritage tourism abroad. His recently published book is called The Remembered and Forgotten Jewish World, Jewish Heritage in Europe and the United States, published last year by Rutgers University Press. And then that's on the 15th of September, and on October 27th, Dan Oren, who is a genealogist and a MD, will be speaking on The Wedding Photo, which is the name of his recently published book. The Wedding Photo, Genealogy Comes Alive. And while I'm making these announcements, I should also mention, for those of you who might be able to get to Long Island, that on October 6th, Krista Cowan, the corporate genealogist at Ancestry, will be speaking at a special meeting of the Jewish Genealogical Society of Long Island. And the day before, on October 5th, she'll be speaking at the DNA group of Long Island. So if any of you are interested in hearing Krista Cowan speak, you can go to those websites or ask me afterwards. And now I want to introduce today's speaker. Let me get to the right page, who I'm sure most of you already know. Phyllis Kramer, who is a practicing genealogist with primary interest in Eastern European Jewish research. Some of you may have taken her courses online with Jewish Gen. As the Vice President of Education at Jewish Gen, Phyllis created and teaches its online interactive courses, manages the Jewish Gen support desk, Lost and Found, and Success Stories. She also maintains 15 Kehilalinks for her ancestral shtetls. And in 2011, Phyllis received the IIJGS Outstanding Achievement Award for her Jewish Gen education program. She has created workshops, classes, presentations for numerous other venues, including IIJGS conferences, Jewish Genealogical Societies, synagogues, and JCCs, and has been a regular speaker to the Jewish Genealogical Society. So please join me in welcoming Phyllis Kramer.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. We're so in the modern age. I've got a little microphone on my shirt. Thank you for the introduction, Joy, and it's nice to see Steve in his new capacity for me. That's wonderful. I love this group. I'm born and bred in New York, and you probably tell by my accent and the speed of which I speak. But you guys are used to it. I have a little trouble in Georgia. So, okay, we're going to talk about death information, and I would say a few things in the beginning. First, I'd appreciate if you turn off your cell phones. There's nothing like listening to the conversation between you and your third cousin, even though you found it genealogically. We're going to take about an hour, and that surprises me because I thought I knew everything about death information in New York, and yet it's really extensive. The reason I created this is I'm teaching New York genealogy online in Jewish Gen, and I found that my students just really didn't know how to follow through. They stopped at the certificate, for instance. And there's more information to be gotten, and very often it can be gotten fairly easily on the internet. I've given you a handout, and the purpose for the handout is twofold. Number one, well, actually threefold. Number one, you don't have to write down URLs or addresses on the web. Number two, if you're looking for someone, you can't find them, peruse the websites that are on the handout at your home research center, and that might give you a clue of where to look. And number three, since I wait for questions at the end, if you have a question, why don't you note it down on the back of the handout, okay, or wherever, so I can handle it at the end. And another thing I'd like you to do, it's always nice to get an active audience. Think about somebody in your genealogy that you want some more death information on. Think about the name, the borough that they died, which is absolutely important in New York because everything is divided up by boroughs, and an approximate date. And as I speak, you may get some clues for that person and jot them down. So, death information in New York. This is what we're going to cover. Certificates, Social Security, newspaper, funeral homes, cemeteries, landsmanshaftn, and probate. Let's start with the process. Okay, what really happens? So the death occurs. Now, if there's an attending physician or if it's in a hospital, the death certificate is initiated by that person. If it's in a home and the police were called, or if it's out in the public, like on a bus, or if there's any suspicion of violence or foul play, then the medical examiner is called in, and he's the one who initiates the death certificate. Then the body gets transferred to the funeral home, and the funeral director has a number of chores we will talk about, but basically he has a transit burial certificate that sometimes the cemeteries have. He'll never have the death certificate, and he'll tell you he doesn't have the death certificate, but he might have the transit or burial certificate. And then he notifies Social Security, arranges the funeral, arranges the burial, and then we have probate. And probate is the dissemination of the person's assets, and we'll go into that because it's really interesting, I think. And the unveiling of the tombstone, which usually takes a year later. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. First of all, U.S. records. They're managed by every state. Birth, death, and marriage, it is totally confusing. There are 50 states. They do everything differently. Their privacy laws are different. Their requirements are different. Their filings are different. What they have available is different. Can be a problem. Major cities, Yonkers, Buffalo, Albany, New York City, does it differently from New York State. Confidentiality can be anywhere from 50 to 125 years, and the certificates are not standardized. And this is key, and it's surprising how many people don't know this. The death certificate is filed where the death took place. The probate is where the person was residing. So if someone died in a hospital in Manhattan, that's where the death certificate will be, even though they live in Brooklyn. So, New York. We'll focus in on New York. We'll look at the records. New York State started or tried to have records in 1947. Didn't last very long. The counties weren't cooperating, so that died. That's cute, that died. And then in June 1880, they really started, and they said the counties all have to fulfill these requirements and send a copy of the death certificate to the State Department of Health. Now, Manhattan is not part of this. Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, and New York City. In Manhattan, it started 1853, and the other boroughs around 66, but they don't file with the State Department of Health. Bless us, they file with the New York City Department of Health. We'll go into that. In any case, early records, there was very little compliance. Just like you can't find a manifest from 1880, okay? You can't find a death from 1880 either. It's very hard to find them. I see and I can document many childhood, infancy deaths that were never documented. So we're missing some death records, just like we're missing some manifests. Focusing in on the actual death record, is it true? And the short answer is no, okay? Not all occurrences were reported. When they were reported, who reported it? Did they have the information at the moment? Was it an emotional time where they're not going to give you the information because they just can't get to it? Women lied their ages, we all know that. The average age of a woman increased 7 years between each federal census. This is true. And the immigrants didn't know their birth date. This one I see all the time. They know their birth date. It might have been the 2nd of Adar. Now, they didn't have the software to translate that into April 3rd or whatever it is, okay? So they may have known that. It just wasn't important. They came here without any documentation. The only documentation required up till 1924 was a ticket. And a ticket you could get under any name. Okay, so they didn't know when they were born. There was no documentation, and that is why you see 7 or 8 different dates for immigrants. The data on the certificate has some clues, however. One of my favorites is the veteran. A lot of the certificates will tell you whether they're a veteran. Well, that's a clue. You're going to go for the draft or the service record. Another one has years in U.S., years in New York. These are all clues. And I learn all this because my students don't do everything they're supposed to. They just take the name and the date. But there's a lot of other things on there. The way I teach, you don't keep any of these handy. You take every document you get and you summarize it with every genealogical clue in it, and you put that into a Word document for the family. Why do you do this? Because trust me, people don't read these documents. They take it, they can't see it, it's too small anyway. But they take the document, they put it away, they think the name and the address and the cemetery is all they need. And then if they think maybe I should get something else, they've got to go fish it out again. So what I say is you take it, you read it, you write a summary, and then you can put that summary in your software program too, very easily. Okay. So the standard parents' names, date of birth. Okay. Different years, different requirements for the certificates, even within New York City. This is a state, 1865, no parents, no wife. Is he married? He died of congestion, whatever, of the lungs, consumption, pneumonia maybe, TB maybe. Here's one from 1898. It's got much more on it. But again, is it true? No, it's as true as the data that was given. Transit permits. There's an interesting period of time in the late 1800s when New York State required a transit permit for any corpse coming into the state. And there's actually a transit permit for Abraham Lincoln. There's a lot of Civil War because they moved the bodies from where they died into wherever, and it's an interesting file. It's at the Muni. This one happens to be from 1901, and they don't have many from that year. This is the standard New York City certificate, and you'll see, how long have you been in the U.S.? How long have you been in New York City? It's one of the things, it's a great clue, because you're going to compare that to when they said they came here, or when you're looking. It may be the only clue to the immigration year, and it, of course, may be false. But you get you get where they were buried, etc., get what they died of. Retired, occupation can sometimes help. Married, widowed, that's also important. So there's a lot of stuff on here. This is a 1946 New York City, and there's no death information. They had a law, and they didn't, after a certain period, they didn't include the death information on the standard death certificate. Okay, now, from 2003 on, every state is standardized because they have this National Center for Health Statistics. Started in the early 1900s, government was federal, okay, and basically it was a staff type of a job where they told told states what they should do, okay, but they didn't have that much power. Now they do, and this is the standard certificate, and all the states must use it, all the county states. Okay, next, causes of death. Another thing that people miss when they've got an old death certificate. There are the expected causes. We know about heart attacks and major illnesses of cancer, etc. We know about the elderly with pneumonia and even old age. I've seen old age on a lot of certificates. But the epidemics can be very interesting. In some cases, TB was a shame. I don't know exactly why, but people were ashamed that somebody in their family had TB. They wouldn't talk about it. It's like syphilis and the death that occurs from that. Maybe it's because TB was contagious, maybe not. I don't know, but TB is, if you see this on a death certificate, you go right to the Denver file. It's on your handout. There was a group in New York who were Jewish men, immigrants, and they founded this Denver Society for other Jews, and you could go to Denver free and be taken care of if you had TB. So you see that on the death certificate, off you go to that. You'll also, the flu. Now the flu was pandemic in 1918. I mean, like 500 million people caught it and tens of millions of people died worldwide. In the United States, over 600,000 people died. And so if you're looking for somebody who died in 1918, you may not find them. There are certificates that have been, or there's lack thereof, of the certificates in 1918, and that's the reason. So many people died, it actually overtook the capabilities and the facilities in New York. You may have trouble finding grave sites for those people too. Old medical terms. You can go right on Google. You can do anything on Google. Okay, you can go right on Google with the medical term. You'll usually find out what it means. But it's interesting. One of my favorites is called mania a poto. Mania a poto means they drank too much. Honestly. So it's interesting. Then you have the unexpected. We'll talk about that. Coroner's records in New York. The coroner was an elected official, okay? Didn't function that well, issued death certificates. He started the death certificate. He didn't finish it. And if necessary, performed an autopsy and an inquest. It was his decision. And there are microfilms at the Family History Center. Can't get them online, but you can get them at the Family History Center to 1914. Now, I don't know about you. I think most of us, our people came between the late 1890s and 1920s. That's where the big bulk of Jewish immigration was. And so I didn't have that many people that died before 1914, but sometimes that works. Then around that time, they had a new law, and it was no longer the coroner, now it was the medical examiner, and that had to be a doctor, so it was better. And the inquests were then turned over to the district attorney, but the inquests from 1918 to 1939 are at the Muni. By the way, the Muni, I have to show you this book. They have one upstairs. It's not inexpensive, but if you're going to the Muni for something other than a death certificate, this book is fabulous, and it's new. It's like 2 years old. I went through an awful lot of the books upstairs. They're wonderful, but they're so outdated when you think of the internet. I have to change these things every year when I pitch. I have to change my lessons every year when I teach, because the internet makes everything flow so quickly. So you can't. It's called New York City Municipal Archives. They have it upstairs. I think it's $36, and it's the New York B&G. But if you want the small print at the Muni, this is fabulous. They tell you that every microfilm number, what you can get, what you can't. And when you walk in with this, they have to show it to you. They can't deny it. New York City Municipal Archives. It's done by the Goodwin is the name, and it's New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. And it's about 2 years old, I believe. I paid $36 for it. That's expensive. Anyhow, those records are at the Muni from 1918 to 1936. You have to go and ask for it, and they will send for it, and they will bring it back for you a week or two later. I actually did get an inquest of a woman who shot herself, okay? So when you're looking at a death certificate and there's a violent death or they died in a bus, order this. Here's one from early 1900s out of Chicago. A little boy died in a traffic accident. And I only point out that this one has the name of the father, the address, the name of the witnesses, what happened. Sometimes these records have newspaper clippings even. So these are good records to go for. And by the way, this is from IRAD, I-R-A-D. If you have anybody that has any information in Chicago or Illinois before 1916, remember the letters IRAD, Illinois Repository, I don't know what the other two stand for. They will, for very, very little, almost pennies, they will send you naturalizations, death records, marriage records, whatever, as long as it's before 1916. So really, okay, back to New York. So where are these records? Okay. New York State, Department of Health, lovely place to deal with. It only takes up to 8 months, and it's $22, and you have to have the index. I mean, give me a break. Okay. Now, Albany, Buffalo, Yonkers, they're easier. They have their own records, much like New York City, and you can write to them, and you can find, directly. They're each different. I had a student just the other day wanted a Rochester death. We went on Google, Rochester death, okay? She found the county, Oswego, and she sent for the record. So these things can be done if you don't deal with the state. But the New York Municipal Archives, we all know about that, German genealogy and Italian gen for the indexes. But the Department of Health, I mean, these people, there's something wrong with them, okay? Now, it is a published fact that it's a 50-year privacy period in New York City. So 50 from 2019 says, so up to 1969, the records should be private, should be public, right? Wrong. New York City Department of Health has decided that is not going to fly. And guess who's going after this? Reclaim the records. So we hope, okay? But they're really difficult. Not only that, but when you get their form says you must fill in who the mother and the father is. Well, if I'm sending my grandmother's form, I'm sending it because I don't know the mother and the father. They have this form, it's this long. It's not inexpensive. You have to send for it, and sometimes they require you to notarize the damn thing. So, I mean, they're really making it difficult. Even if you go there, it's not an easy task, the New York City Department of Health. And I hope that Brooke gets to reclaim the records against these people because they deserve it. Okay, so death information online. That's what we all do. We seldom go to archives, except maybe the Muni. So these are the places I'm going to discuss. National Center, the indexes, Family Search, Ancestry, and Reclaim the Records. National Center for Health Statistics started early in the 1900s, and they're a wonderful source for a state you don't know a lot about. When I have a student that wants Arizona, I go there because they'll tell me what's available, how much does it cost, where can I write? And if there's a website, this is where you can catch the information. It's a federal organization, and I depend on them. That's on your handout too. The next thing I depend on is the death indexes. This is Joe Bine. He creates this and he keeps it up to date. And the difference between this and the National Center is this is strictly online things. But he will give you the addresses for death information online by state and city. And that makes life easier. Then we have the wonderful German genealogy group and the Italian gen. I know you all know about that, so I'm not going to go into it. Family Search. Family Search has some great info. But I want to digress a little bit and talk about catalogs. When you go into Family Search or Ancestry, they're the two most popular. You can put in Frank Rothschild and see what happens, but you don't always get what you want. The second step I do is I go to the catalog, both on Ancestry and Family Search, because I want to know what they have, so I know why I'm not getting what I want. To make that clearer, if I'm looking for an 1880 manifest, I don't go to Ellis Island, because I know Ellis Island starts in 1892. So I've got to find another website. So I see a lot of my students that go into Ancestry or Family Search, look for X, and don't find it, and complain. But then I ask them, well, what does the database cover? I don't know. Does it cover all the counties, wherever you're looking? Does it cover all the years? For instance, there's, I think, a 1905 census, but I think that one is only for Brooklyn, okay? I'm not sure about which county it's for. But unless you look up the census, when you want a 1905 census and you want it for the Bronx, and Bronx doesn't exist unless you know that, it doesn't matter that you're querying the 1905 census. The same thing happens with death records. So learn to use the catalogs in those two major websites. To get the catalog, you click on search, you click on catalog, you click on place query, because the query is by place. And then you enter the place and scroll down to vital records, and this is what it's going to look like. This is Cincinnati, okay? But you'll see they have vital records indexes, newspapers, and then they'll explain within each one of those categories exactly what they have. Then you go query. And they'll also tell you in Family Search whether it's online or you have to go to a Family History Center, because they have that little key. It means unless you're a Mormon or you're at a Family History Center, you cannot get the digitized version, which is okay. And I think the reason they're doing that is they've had trouble with governments putting a lot of this, their contracts with the government did not include the ability to put it online and make it public. So they've had some trouble with that, and that's why you see a lot of those keys. The same thing with Ancestry, even easier. You go to search, then you go to the card catalog. I put in the card catalog under Ancestry, Maine death. Well, that's what they've got. Now, if I'm looking for 1950, I'm not going to find it, right? So after I put in, and I don't get Maine 1950, I go look at the catalog to see what is it they do have. Important concept, really. And now Brooke Schreier Gans. She's wonderful. She's a little Johnny Appleseed of our genealogy here. Brooke believes that public records should be public. And she's terrific. She goes to the organization and she asks for the records. If they don't get it, she goes back to the organization and she threatens them. And if she doesn't get it, she sues them. And she always seems to win, which is just wonderful. These are the things that she has either in progress or is up there on Reclaim the Records. And you can go to the Reclaim the Records site and see exactly where she stands, and it changes from month to month. But what does she do, though? She actually gets involved with Family Search, Internet Archive, and Ancestry, because those records have to be digitized. Those records, she may get a microfilm from the governmental group, but she's got to digitize them and index them. So she works with all the major firms. Okay, you'll find that some of these things are on 3 different places. They're in Family Search, Ancestry, MyHeritage, and also Internet Archive. It gets very confusing as to what's where because it's dynamic. But at any rate, this is what she's got. She's got the death records for the state. She's got marriage licenses. Marriage licenses for New York City. They are very valuable. You can get them out of the cabinet at the Muni, but they're digitized now. Why are they important? Well, the bride might have said Russia on her certificate, but she might have said Kiev on her license. It's a small chance, but it's possible. So you might get additional information. Secondly, and when they digitize them, the divorce records are on there. You have to prove divorce if you say it's your second marriage, okay? And so that's a great way to get divorce records, which are very difficult to get. And then there's Jersey. And then there's another one I want to point out is the Geographical Index. How many people have used that? Aha, I got something you don't know. Okay. Behind the desk in the Muni archives is something called the Geographical Birth Index, okay? And what they did from the late 1890s to about 1910 is they put in the births by the building number. And of course, all the Jews lived in these huge tenements, so you have 10 years or 15 years of births within a building if you know the address. It's a really good thing. That's what she's fighting to get. Okay. Next topic. I switch from topic to topic. Social Security Index. Social Security started in 1935, and most people enrolled between 1935 and 1940, except that self-employed didn't even get in until 1950s. So a doctor, a lawyer, I don't know about the Indian chief, but the doctor and the lawyer and anybody self-employed would not come into Social Security until the 50s. There was a little bit of hit and miss because in order to end up on the Social Security Death Index, somebody had to tell them. And it wasn't until the 80s that the hospitals and the funeral directors alerted the Social Security people. So you may find someone who died even though they had a Social Security number, but nobody ever applied for it and nobody ever told the Social Security, so you don't find it. Because don't forget, what's online is a death index, not an enrollment index. Okay. You want to find, here's another, generally speaking, a point that I try to make with my students. When you look at the Social Security Death Index, whatever group that is in the federal government, they sell it. They sell it to Ancestry, Family Search, MyHeritage. Everybody gets the same microfilm. But the indexes are different. And the query against that microfilm is different. And the digitization is different. And the mistakes are different. Okay? So, if you want to find something and you don't find it on one, you might try another who has got a better index. I think the best index to Social Security is on Family Search. Okay? All right. What you're looking, this is the Family Search Death Index, and you'll get this information, or the vast majority of it. The key thing here is there's a last benefit, okay? So somebody claimed a benefit, probably a wife in those days. And you find the issued by, not the birth, but the issued by, very important, okay? And this beauty is the Social Security application, and this is phenomenal. This is first person. And we don't find much first person. We hear clerks writing it down, whether it's a manifest or a vital record. This is first person. You've got the person signing it. And this man, Irving Tanner, says his father was Pinchas Tarnofka. Well, where are you going to get that? I mean, that's really good. So the problem with it is we used to get them for $7. Now they're $26. So you're only going to do it when you're stuck. But it's a terrific, and it also asks for birthplace, and a lot of immigrants. Okay, this is the Social Security Claims Index, which is on Ancestry and really quite good. I think it's best for finding who the woman married. You take a look at this woman, she's got one, two, three, four surnames. So obviously she's done a bit of marrying, and that's a great place to find her. So it's benefit claims and changes in name, and they've registered that. Next topic, funeral homes. The funeral home director has a lot of responsibilities. He has to ensure that the death certificate is completed and registered, and the burial transit certificate is completed and registered. He's got to ensure that they're ready for the burial. He's got not only the funeral, but he also does handle newspaper advertisements. We'll go into that in a second. These are not public records, however, and you have to be really nice. Has anyone here ever gotten an old record from a funeral home in New York City? Old record from a funeral home. Mount Zion's a cemetery. I want a funeral director. I'm telling you, I can't get them to give me anything. But if you go to a little town in the middle of Ohio, the guys, they help you. They go into their files. Maybe the files aren't so extensive. But it's very difficult to get information from a funeral director, and yet they've got all the information that you want. Yeah, there are a few on Ancestry, but most of the time you're not going to get much from them, unfortunately. Yes, they have to keep the records, but they don't have to make them available. That's the kick. So if they have a storage place, you're out of luck. That's my experience. Yes, it's in storage. Okay. There is a New York state law. And in fact, there's a New York state law that if a funeral home goes out of business, another funeral home has to take their records. But they don't have to make it available. So it's kind of, moot. Okay. Two types. You've got the one on the right, special to the New York Times. That is an obituary. That was written by the paper, usually somebody of prominence. The one on the left, that, as you can see the format, is put in by the funeral director when he talks to the person who's arranging the funeral, usually a close relative. They're wonderful. They'll give you the married names of the daughters and how many grandchildren and anything, sometimes what organizations they belong to, and really good information. So those are your two choices. Now, the obits are in newspapers, and I could probably spend another hour on newspapers. So what I've done is just given you a list of where you find newspapers from New York. ProQuest you can get out of either I don't think they have it upstairs, but you can get out of major libraries. New York Public Library had it for a while. I don't know if they still do, because ProQuest is very expensive, and it's a yearly contract. So the libraries come and go as to what they have. There was a time, and I'm not sure if it's still, that you could get ProQuest at home from Westchester Library. Again, every year it was different. It's like the New York Times. They have to pay for it. So you have to ask. And the more people that ask, the better the chances are of them getting it back. So you have Google, which has a wonderful list, and you have the Library of Congress and Ancestor Hunt, New York State historical newspapers. Ancestry has the historical newspapers, birth, marriage, and death announcements. That comes from ProQuest. It's not very complete, but they have it. And Fulton. How many people have tried to use Fulton? Yes, it's wonderful. The Brooklyn Eagle, it's fabulous, but it is frustrating. Well, we have an answer today. There is a new site called Fulton Search Org. Now, you know the difference. Org is organization, nonprofit, and com is commercial. So you have ancestry.com, jewishgen.org. Tells you something. Okay, this guy didn't like going through Fulton, so he did his own search, and it's fabulous. It gives you the name highlighted, it tells you where it came from, and it's quick, and it's a clear search. So this is a good one to go to, and I don't think it's more than 2 years old. Okay, where would you find the obituaries per se? which are not newspapers. Genealogy Bank is expensive and Ancestry owns it. You can go on there, or you can get the obits from Family Search. I'll show you how in a second. Ancestry is reinvigorating RootsWeb. Ancestry just must have so much money. Can you think about it? You pay $100 to get a DNA test, and they've got 10 million people that participated. So you do the math, okay? $100 times 10 million? Okay, so Ancestry is reinvigorating RootsWeb, which is great. And on RootsWeb, you will find the Obituary Daily Times, and there actually is a link to get volunteers to go look up obituaries for you, which is wonderful. Ancestry, by the way, is reinvigorating Heritage Quest, which we all haven't used in a million years, but it's online with most of the libraries, and it has invigorated it, has given it new databases. It's very interesting that it's done that. You can also go on Legacy, a very common good obituary site. And in this case, this is how you'd look for Annie Oakley and get anything they had on her. And then you can Google the town and the word newspaper and see what's there. Now, this is important. Family Search has genealogy summaries, obit summaries. And the way you get it is you go on the regular search, and then you come down here to where it says find a collection, this little box, and you type Genealogy Bank in there. And it will give you the summaries of all the obits that Genealogy Bank has. If you want to get more information, remember it's a summary, you might go and pay for it or find a friend that's got Genealogy Bank, but this is free and this is quite good. I use it a lot. Jewish Gen, people forget about us. We have some unique things. Look, we've got Boston and Cleveland and Chicago and of course Jobar. All right, so we've got two sources for you online that are a little different, and the American Jewish yearbooks are on there. So there's a possibility of obituaries. Cemeteries. I love this picture. It's in the Ukraine. You know, I lived in Savannah for a while, and when my guests would come, I would take them to Bonaventure, because Bonaventure is half Jewish and half non-Jewish, and it's the most beautiful place in Savannah. The oaks hanging and the benches, you know, in Victorian times, that's where they would picnic. That's why all the benches and what. It was clean, it had fresh air, and you know, that's where they went, families. So, cemeteries. What are the traditions? Landsmanshaftn, tombstones, and cemetery listings. Okay, this is the Landsmanshaftn. Landsmanshaftn was a group of people from the old country that got together for social and welfare. That's why they're always called sick and benevolent or something on that order. They usually had a storefront, and they would get together, and they continued the tradition of Eastern Europe, which was to get together and have a cemetery plot. It saved them a lot of money to buy a big plot and sell the little ones within, and that's what you have. And the good ones have a list, you can't read it, but they have a list of who were the offices and where it was and all sorts of things. And you could walk around one of those and find new relatives. You really can. So, you know about Landsmanshaftn because there's some wonderful things at the JGS site. There is the JGS lists of the cemeteries and the lists of the Landsmanshaftn, which is unique. There's also some information at New York Public Library and the YIVO files. Oh, now that's a kick. First, you need patience, you need time. You don't need money, but you need patience, time, and you need to read Yiddish, because all these files are old and they're written in Yiddish. Very little English. And you need patience because YIVO doesn't have anything here. They will send for them. So I know people that have tried. It's not easy, but it can be done. They've got a number of the files, and they're in the catalog. You can find them. Kehilalinks. I maintain 12, 14 Kehilalinks sites, and I have burial plot information, and I have the cemetery map. And then the information went to Jobar, but the cemetery map is on my site. So look on the Kehilalinks for information about a particular town. This is a beautiful book. They have it upstairs too. It's 2 little books, but it's online. And what it is a survey of Jewish organizations in these years. And it's got the officers and what they do and where they were located. And it's online it's a really nice book. I actually have downloaded it. It's very big. It's in libraries. The full text is on Family Search, so you can query it, and it's on Google Books, which I downloaded. So if you have a landsmanshaftn, you can sometimes, in some of them, you can get the list of officers. The tombstone. I'm sure you all know about that. Whether it's the father's name, the Hebrew names, the relationships. I find students don't follow on the relationship. If the tombstone says just a sister, it's a dead end. If the tombstone says grandchild, then you want to go forward. So that should be kept with the cemetery information. The signs, the Cohens and the Levites and the books for a learned man and the Star of David for a Jewish person. So that can be key also. And if you don't know how to read Hebrew, there's this 2-pager on Jewish Gen on the info files, which makes it almost really easy to figure out what's on the key things on the tombstone. Cemetery sites. We have 3.5 million cemetery sites on Jewish Gen worldwide. And they're coming in. We've got more people. Jewish Gen is now getting half every year of new people from outside the US. There's an amazing amount of Israelis and Frenchmen and Australians and blah, blah, blah. They don't have anywhere else to go, okay? So when you need something about Israel, put it on the discussion list. And if you need if you want to look for a death, a tombstone, try Jobar, even for Lithuania. Although I must admit that a lot of them that I've done, they just have the first name and the year, and it's a little difficult, but sometimes you can make the connection. Find a grave, billion grave, military, that's on your website too. That's on your handout too. There's a very nice website for military. You know about Jewish data because it's here, and it's great. It's got Waltham. Where else can you get Waltham? It's got Mount Carmel. It's got some smaller cemeteries, and it's got some Canadian cemeteries and some New Jersey cemeteries. I'd like to meet this guy again because he's got even naturalizations. He started out just cemeteries, but he's grown. So it might behoove you to take a look at what he's got. Okay, and then Google. And I'll close now with probate, which is probably my favorite, and the reason, different thing. Probate is the legal process by which a person's assets are distributed at death. It is a public document. That's really important. No privacy period there. It is filed in the county of residence, usually in the surrogate or probate court. They have different names for the courts, but it's filed in the county of residence. Okay, here's what happens. Get a death. The person who has the will, and the will, by the way, is a paper describing how the deceased wants their assets divided. The person who holds the will presents it to the court. Could be a lawyer, could be a relative, could be a bank, whoever has the will. They present it to the court. The court will say, okay, you will be the executor, or in Florida, for instance, you're the personal representative. If you don't have a will for a person and there are assets, you die intestate. And that is a real something. Intestate is the low-hanging fruit for the courts because they will appoint the attorneys who will appoint the CPAs, who will appoint the real estate agents, who will appoint this, that, and the other thing, and everybody takes a piece out of it. And it goes on interminably. I'm involved in a 4-year Queens County probate intestate. Okay. It's really difficult. And they've got their own rules on who deserves what. Okay. The next word you need to see, because you'll see it in the probate files, is the letter of administration. And what that means is you as a relative might go to the court and say, look, there's not enough money in here for probate. After all, what is probate? It's the state taking its pick. It's the creditors get first crack at the assets, and the first creditor is the state and the federal government taxes, okay? But if you come to the court and you say, look, there's not that much money, it's not really good, shouldn't be a probate, they will grant you letter of administration, and you can then distribute the assets. And it happens, like in Florida, it's under 75,000. Okay, basically the same thing. Here, I don't know what the cutoff is, but it's changed over the years. And let's face it, most of our ancestors in the early 1900s, they didn't have probate. They didn't have, okay? I think I've seen probate records starting in the 30s, 40s, 50s. I don't see them in the 10s and 20s. I don't see wills in the 10s and 20s. We just didn't have that many that had enough assets. The files. The early files, they're in these libers. They're big and they're old and they're dusty and they put them all in, okay? Then we had more paperwork, so we went to folders. So we had file folders. And today, a lot of it is databases. And I will tell you that these papers are going away. You can't find a census today from 1910, except from the microfilms. The census, they threw it away. We did, when I worked for IBM, we did the law in Westchester County and the deeds and mortgages. Those things are going away. You will get what's on the computer. So eventually it'll all be databases. I don't know if that's good or bad. This is a probate. Why is probate great? Look at all the relationships. This is a granddaughter. This is her name. This is where she lives. This is the great-granddaughter. This is the grandson. You know, it's great. And if there's contesting of the will, and there were some funny contestants, people came out of the woodwork. Think Prince, okay? Prince. He's got billions of dollars. How many relatives are going to come out of the woodwork for him? It's the same thing here. If they come out of the woodwork and they contest the will, it can end up that thick. Where do you access the probate file? There's a red book. There's a red book upstairs. It's just a list of the courts. So you know where to get it for New York. Okay, I'll show you that in a minute. But if you're looking for Arizona, you can go into the red book. It's also online and figure out the court that handles probate. It could be probate, it could be infants court, it could be surrogate. There's a lot of different words. There's online places. I gave you 2 of them that show you what the courts are in New York County and in Palm Beach County. There's a website I gave you that you can look up any county. You need to know the county. It's usually a county function. So it's easy to find where they are, okay? So, probate online, Ancestry and Heritage Quest, okay? Heritage Quest, if you don't have Ancestry. Start with the search, go to the catalog. I showed you how I did death in Maine. Do probate in Maine. See what Ancestry has. It may have nothing, but it'll give you the years that it covers. This is what I found that I thought was really good. Jersey wills, Connecticut and Florida. My experience with probate online is it's never complete. There's always somebody missing. I've got, there's 10,000 people in my database, and I must have 150 probates that I have found over the years, mostly from going to Brooklyn and going to New York. They're not all on there. I don't know why. But Family Search. Generally speaking, it's the best source for probate. Okay, now how do you do that? You go out there, every time you start in Family Search, if you know the state, you don't want to know about Arizona and Utah with the same name, so you start with the state. How do you do that? You click on that map and you research by location. It'll give you a listing of the states, you pick out the state. I prefer starting focused, and then if I can't find what I want, I take a look around. But if I know somebody died in New York, I'm going to ask for deaths and probate in New York. Okay? So you start with the research location, and what you're going to see there is imaged only historical records, which could scare the hell out of anyone who wants to browse through 10, they have 10 million probates. So who wants to browse through that? But it's really easy. These are the two collections you need to know about: New York probate records and the Bronx probate estate files. Alas, probate in Bronx, I'll show you, is only till 1931. But these are under the browsable, non-indexed. So it scares people, they don't go. But there's good stuff. Let's talk about Bronx. If you go to the Bronx, the Grand Concourse, and that's a trip in itself, it's really nice. They have a database till 31, and the records, always call them first if you can, or look it up first, because there's so many folders in storage. So you can find out whether you can give them the name and they will have it for you when you go there, or whether you have to go there, give them the name, and then go back. So the records are in the basement. But Family Search has alpha indexed to full file images with those years. Now, I had people in the Bronx. I lived in the Bronx as a child, but nobody I know died with a probate before 31. So I can't even test to see if they're all there, okay? But they have the actual, this is a letter of administration with the man's name and the date. They have the actual files. So if you've got Bronx, it's worth looking. And what it's worth doing, by the way, is having a program, a software program, that you can ask. We call it Boolean logic, but that scares people. You can ask the software program, give me all the people who died in the Bronx between 1914 and 1931. If your software program can't do that, get another one. There are two I know that do it. Legacy does it. And mine, the master genealogist, which isn't even being updated anymore, but the master genealogist, you can perform Boolean logic against the database. Give me all the men who were born between 1900 and 1920, because I'm looking for World War II records. So that Boolean logic against a database is absolutely imperative if you've got a big database. If you have 300 people, you can figure it out. But if you have 8,500 or 10,000 or 17,000, you need some help. Okay, so Bronx, back to Bronx. Excellent to 1931. After that, go there. So now there's this New York probate records. That's enough to scare anybody because it says browse images, okay? And that's scary, but it's wonderful. This is what happens when you click on it. You get all the counties in New York. For New York City, you only get Queens and Brooklyn. So what I'm talking to you about now is Queens and Brooklyn only. They have something called a card index. All right, there's an example of a card index. Is there any more information you want? No. It tells you the name, the address, the number of the probate, the year of death, and the fact that it's probate with a P. That's all I want. Now, I can find out what it takes to get the file, but I've got all the information I want. Brooklyn up through 1971. And this is what it looks like. This is how you go in on it. General card index, H to HAH. We can handle this, okay? So don't hesitate for Queens and Brooklyn. Right through to 1971. Well, it's not really on 1971. That's their intention, I think. They're adding more every year. I've seen it go till the 60s so far. This is a 69, so yeah, it's pretty good. When you get there, at 360 Adams, that's a kick too. They're very helpful there, unlike some other places. There is a room full of cabinets with index cards. Literally it's bigger than this room. It's got cabinets with index cards. Index cards are terrific because if you're looking up Charlie Brown, you can look up all the other Browns. See if there's anybody else that, if the wife has a probate. So it's really good to go there. They're very helpful. The files are in the basement, but they'll pick up 3 of them for you. So you have to be selective. You can give them and if you smile at them and be nice, they'll give you another 3. So Family Search, Ancestry, and Heritage Quest have this data, which is wonderful. But Family Search is the best one. This is Queens, very similar. Here's Sydney, 1954, an address. Boy, you know if it's your Sydney, or at least you got a really good idea. It just doesn't give you the age. But on Sutphin Boulevard, they have sets of indexes. I actually have a guy you can email there. They have card indexes, and this is what they have through 1960s for Queens. Okay, Manhattan, not online. Okay, they have there at 31 Chambers, how many have been to the 4th floor? Isn't it cool? A little man sits behind the desk and he looks at you like he's going to eat you for lunch. But you're strong. You're strong. You're going to get your probate. Okay, so you have to figure out that 900 systems. They've got digitized. They've got indexes. They've got lists. Oh, they've got everything. Okay, you figure out, because you go in there with the name of the person that resided in Manhattan and about when he died. So you can go in there and figure out where in this system he belongs. They actually have a document that says if you want us to search for you, it's $30 within the last 25 years, and it's $90 if it's older than that. That'll keep anybody from doing it, except maybe an attorney. Okay, and if you mail order it, it's $6 a page, but they have this little machine with a quarter, and we all have cell phones, so it works out really right. You also can ask for 3 of them. They give you a little form. You gotta fill out the form exactly, and I mean exactly, and you give it to the nice man, and you flirt with him a little and see if you get anything better, and he'll find them. A lot of the files are missing, mostly because these people never knew how to, put them in the right place. If you've ever been up to the 7th floor, 31 Chambers, you know what I mean. These people don't know how to put anything away. Anyway, Manhattan. This is what's on Ancestry. It is a index with the library numbers and the file numbers for people before 1915. And again, it's a wills index. It's a wills index before 1923. But I didn't know anyone that died before 1923 in Manhattan, so I could not verify these things. But I will tell you, there is a library room, and I don't know if they let you in there anymore, but there was a time they let us in on the 4th floor, and it's a room that's got about that much dust on everything, and the libraries are all over. The letter of administration from 1902, and the wills from 1898, and they're huge, and you have to drag them out and put them down, and it's interesting, but that will tell you where they are. Okay, so before 1923, otherwise you have to go there and figure out all their indexes. And it can be done, but nobody's there to help you. Okay. New York wills, probate records. Interesting thing that I learned from teaching in New York is that when you go into New York Ancestry, which most of us use, and you go into the birth, marriage, and death, or you go into the all search for a person's name, you will not get the probate record. They don't search that one. You have to go in separately for the probate record. You have to go in either to New York Wills and Probate, which is basically, I can tell you that this is exactly what's on Family Search, okay? So when someone dies, you can't rely on the general birth, marriage, and death. You have to go in directly to probate. And you would go there through the card catalog. They have indexes and images through 1929. That covers the entire New York. And the source is Family Search. And it's easier on Family Search. And that's all. Questions?
Can you hear me? We just wanted to add that as benefit of membership in the JGS, we you get access to Jewish data, which you discussed.
To what?
Jewish data, which is
Jewish
you have-
data,
you
yes.
had a dollar bill, dollar
Yes.
sign next to it.
Yes?
You have to pay a subscription. If you're a member of the Jewish Genealogical Society, you get access to it for free. So I thought I'd put that plug in.
Did you learn anything? Oh, good. Okay, that's the important thing. I'm an educator. Okay. There's another one back there too.
I have a very specific question. You said that if a funeral home closes, they have to turn their records over to another funeral home. How would you find out what the second funeral home
You
is?
call all the funeral homes in the neighborhood. I'm sorry, but that's it. You could try going to the state, whatever state it is. You talk about New York? It's going to help you anyway. But you could try going to New York. There is a director of, not funeral homes, but there's a couple of organizations that they have on cemeteries. They would probably know, but I don't think you got a shot, frankly. I have never been successful in New York at a funeral home. Okay. But when you go to Potsdam somewhere in Ohio and there's only one funeral home, he has all the records from all the ones that are gone. Sorry.
Yes. I'm curious about Staten Island, the forgotten borough.
You're the only one I know because I don't include it usually.
Well, here I am.
Okay.
I understand there are cemeteries out there where Jewish cemeteries from
Okay.
a society. And when I was a little girl, we had cousins who lived in Brooklyn who used to stop at our house in Staten Island on the way to the cemeteries.
Okay.
But that's all I know about them.
Well, there are definitely cemeteries. You know, in a certain time in the late 1800s, New York City said no more cemeteries in New York City, and they actually moved a few of them out. So Staten Island seems to have the
Baron Hirsch.
Baron Hirsch, the Baron
could-
Hirsch.
You can
Although
go,
there's multiples.
Mount Richmond, you can go on our site, the JGS site. We have a directory of all the Jewish cemeteries in the New York metropolitan area. We have all the Jewish cemeteries in the 5 boroughs, Nassau, Suffolk, the inner counties of New Jersey, Westchester, and probably 1 or 2 more counties.
There is, if you go into Family Search under New York Probate, there is Richmond. I have not looked at it, but I don't know what it has. I wish you luck.
I just wanted to give some information. There's another site, I don't know if you know about it, that I found a lot of information on. It's sorted by name, and I think it's .org. And they will have information on it's just very minimal information. I found my grandmother's social security number on there, which I couldn't find anywhere else.
What do they sort?
They sort information on deaths, on social security information, deaths, marriages, births, and they're just adding more and more on there all the time. I don't know who created
I'm
it.
almost objected. I almost object to that. You know, my feeling is if you're going to start a site, give me something new. I don't need what's on 7 other sites, okay? You only confuse the issue and make more work for me.
But as I say, I found
Sorted by
information
name.
on there that I couldn't find anywhere else.
Well, what was the example of what you found?
My grandmother's social security number, which then enabled me to get her application for her social security
She
card.
wasn't on the Social Security Death Index?
No, it wasn't anywhere else. And I found it there, and then I was able to get it, and from that found her mother's name, which I never knew.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Do you know where they got that information? No. That's helpful. That's good for sourcing. Sorted by me. It's another thing I'm really against. People that put information on the internet without giving you a source. At least. Oh, okay.
Okay. First of all, very good lecture. The best this whole season. Two minor questions though. First of all, you did not touch on find a grave.
Yeah, I mentioned it. Find a grave and billion graves.
Oh,
They're very
okay.
good.
Oh, okay, all right. But then the other thing was with Social Security, One thing that you didn't mention was that it's become, since the deaths of 2014 up to the present, they've made it very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
They've become very restrictive, and now you have to be, I guess, you have to be a direct descendant of the child or whatever it is. I know there's a lot of red tape since 2014. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think what they're not allowing Ancestry and Family Search to put the indexes up. There's a 75-year redaction. If you get the Social Security, they won't tell you the parent's name unless the person is dead for 75 years. They've got all sorts of rules. But, and it'll change every year, I promise you.
Is IRAD just for Illinois residents? You mentioned IRAD. Does it have
IRAD.
Yeah. Does it have records from the whole United States?
No,
Or just Illinois.
Illinois repository, just Illinois. And they're wonderful because so many Jews lived in Chicago and Joliet and those surrounding communities. So they're really wonderful for early records.
On a death certificate of my great-grandmother, it tells me what cemetery she's buried in. When I
Yes.
call the cemetery, they claim they have no record. What do you do?
Well, I'd look for spelling. What cemetery is it?
Beth Hirsch.
Beth Hirsch.
And
I'd go out there. Go talk to Baron Hirsch.
Baron
No, they
Hirsch,
don't have
yes.
such good records. But I'd go out there. I'd go out there and pay a visit to the cemetery. I'd walk around, talk to the people in the office, schmooze a little bit, and think of other ways she might have been buried under other names. Maybe she remarried. Maybe she used a different first name. Some of them are very particular. You give them exact name, they look it up, they don't find it, goodbye. So you schmooze a little bit. Think about what other names she might have been,
Or what society she
and
was in.
come with the certificate. Come with a copy of the certificate. Now look, it says here, so you either have it or you have a transit permit to send her somewhere else. I want to see it. Okay? Good luck.
First of all, actually, I want to add, I once, a little bit ago, went to Baron Hirsch and I looked up some of my own relatives, and when I did go there, apparently they didn't have anything computerized. They had to go through all these things of files and stuff. It was a nightmare in that particular case, so I don't blame you for not finding anything, because I'd probably have trouble finding people there too. Oh, they eventually did, but that's a whole other story. But my question as a follow-up is, as a rule, are there what sort of records are available in cemeteries? Is it just
Nothing.
vary a lot in terms
Nothing.
of each one?
As a rule, they'll give you nothing. If you schmooze and ask, you might get a transit burial certificate. They have, but they will not. They don't have to, and they don't share with you the plot maps. For the landsmanshaftn, there's a plot map because that's what they did. They bought a plot, and and you bought, and yeah. So they don't share that with you either. Most of them, the big ones are online. Now that's shared. Okay, everything is there online. I don't know what else you want. They don't have the death certificates. So what else would you want from them?
So, when I
That's why you
mentioned-
go there. I think that's right.
Mount Zion before, on cards, sometimes they have the address where the person died. This is going back to the turn of the century, so it was helpful to get a little more information.
I would definitely look up, if it's a landsmanshaftn, the Kehilalinks and the Jobar. And I would always ask at the office, do they have a plot map? Do they have any information about the plot? Do they have somebody who did the perpetual care? Sometimes they have that information.
I went into a cemetery recently, and the person who was that person I knew had died 20 years ago, and they asked me to put my name on it. But sometimes they do have the name of the person.
Yeah.
This was wonderful. It flew by very, very quickly. I am wondering if this will ever be streamed on the web. I would like to watch
I think
it again.
the society does that, don't they? There you go, the audio.
If we put the audio on the web for members, that audio will be available. We're having a little bit of a problem with the audio right now. We hope to have it cleared up soon, but the audio will be online for 2 years,
I'll tell you
and
what
then it's free.
I'd like to do that. I'd like to share with you. I'd like to put it on Jewish Gen. We also don't have the software yet, but I have a number of presentations that I've made on different topics, some of them here, and I'd love to get them all up there. It's just a question of the technical.
And there will also be a written report on this meeting eventually in Doroth, probably in the fall issue.
Sorry. Thank you very much. This is great.
Soon.
I guess it's two questions. One, you mentioned, a lot of our ancestors probably died intestate, and there was something about a letter of administration. But I'm wondering, what kind of information would there be, or would there be anything on these people? I do have ancestors who were here fairly early in the late 19th century, early 20th century.
Not probate.
Okay.
If they didn't have assets, especially real estate, jewelry, stock, there's no probate. Even the letters of administration are later than early 20th century. Then there's nothing. There's a death certificate, unfortunately.
No, that's what I thought. My second question is a little specific, but I think it's interesting. I hope it doesn't bore people. I have what I think is a great-grandfather who died, it was very mysterious, on Ward's Island. And there are newspaper articles about it saying that his wife was informed months later when she went to visit him in the asylum, and that she was very upset. She was going to do investigating. I don't know if there'd be any more records that were generated
Try
from
the
this.
Muni. That's the book. If there was anything done in New York in terms of court cases or what, it will tell you where to look for it. That's the book. You want something very specific and, kind of out of the ordinary. That's the book, and it will tell you. It's got details, yes. And let me tell you something. We use the word asylum, and today we think it's a funny farm, but it isn't. Asylum was an asylum. It had people that didn't have money. It had people that were sick. It had people that were a problem. It had a lot of things. And the other thing, I actually thank you for reminding me. Potter's Field. I didn't discuss that, and we should. Potter's Field, also known as Hart's Island, has a society today which is trying to get the information. If you died on the street and nobody came to claim you, if you died in prison, the Department of Corrections owned Potter's Field and they would bury you. And whether or not there was any certificates was chancy. Right now they're trying to get all that data together, and of course they're finding some, real worms in there. But that was a possibility. And when you tell me that somebody was in Ward's Island, I would say you have to go to Hart's Island. And you're not going to find those in the Mount Zion Cemetery. You're not going to find them in the regular thing. You might want to join the association for the Potter's Field.
Thank you.
He's coming.
I wanted to say thank you for the things that you were talking about. You triggered a memory. My grandfather did have TB, and he did live in Denver for quite a while. Secondly, when I was doing research on him 6 months ago, please don't ask me where, I found information about him through naturalization records, which is surprising. He was here for 6 years before he applied for citizenship.
Okay. Well, they only had to be here for 2 years before they put in the Declaration of Intention. And then there was a couple of more years till they could file the petition. They didn't have to speak a lot of English. And, after 6 years, if you were living somewhere else, you picked up enough to get through that.
The New York City Department of Health.
Not enough.
Well, now, I was at that demonstration at the New York City Department of Health in October that
Good.
you mentioned. Back on the front, my wife picture. Okay, can you hear me now? They've relaxed the restrictions where if you're a nephew, a grandnephew, even, so all you have to do is not put down cousin. If you put down anything else, you can get a certificate.
That's
okay. Of course, it takes about a year to get them. From the state, it doesn't take just 8 months. I sent them last June 2018. I still haven't gotten it. This past January, for New York City Department of Health. I still haven't gotten it, but they have restricted the availability of getting
And
it.
was this for a death between?
These are all death certificates.
Was this for a death between 1949 and 69?
No,
When it's supposed to
1949
be
into
public?
into the present. To the present.
To the
There's no upper limit anymore. You can
Okay.
now, the guy who was responsible for all these restrictions, Schwartz, is gone. So this impediment is gone.
Okay.
And so now there's
Depending on the
greater availability.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you, Phyllis,
Pleasure.
for a wonderful talk. Always welcome.